The sun was high and hot in the bright blue sky, beating down on the quiet suburban street. On the corner, where the sidewalk cracked like an old riverbed, stood a small, wobbly table. It was a child's table, with brightly colored legs that were a little too short, making the person behind it have to stoop. This was Maya's lemonade stand. It wasn't much, just a piece of cardboard leaning against a chair with the words, "Lemonade -50, written in a mix of blue and purple crayon. The letters were big and wobbly, some backwards, but the message was clear. A large glass pitcher, beaded with sweat, sat in the center, filled with a pale yellow liquid and floating with slices of lemon and chunks of ice. Next to it, a small glass jar with a few coins clinking sadly at the bottom. Maya, who was only 8 years old, stood behind her table. She had a determined look on her face that seemed much too old for her. Her brow was furrowed in concentration as she watched the street, her eyes scanning left and right for any sign of a customer. She wasn't fidgeting or bouncing around like most kids would be on a summer day. She was still almost like a little soldier at her post. Every now and then she would reach out with a small hand and straighten the sign, or wipe a drop of condensation from the side of the pitcher. Her movements were careful and deliberate. This wasn't a game. For Maya, this little stand was the most important thing in the world. From the living room window of the house behind her, her parents watched. Her mother, a kind-faced woman with tired eyes, kept her hands clasped tightly together, as if in prayer. Her knuckles were white. Every time a car slowed down, her breath would catch in her throat. Her father stood beside her, one arm wrapped around her shoulders. He tried to smile, a gentle, encouraging smile for his daughter, but it never quite reached his eyes. His gaze was heavy with a sadness so deep it felt like a physical weight in the room. They were proud of her, so incredibly proud, but watching her sit there, day after day, was a special kind of heartbreak. They saw the seriousness in her little face, and it broke them all over again. Every single time, a woman walking a small, fluffy dog trotted by. The dog, a yappy little thing with a pink bow on its head, pulled on its leash, its nose twitching at the smell of sugar. The woman, who was busy talking on her phone, barely glanced at the stand. Maya sat up a little straighter, her eyes hopeful, but the woman just walked on, her voice a distant drone into her phone. Maya's shoulders slumped for just a moment. It was a tiny movement, a brief surrender to disappointment. But then, just as quickly, she straightened her back, took a deep breath, and resumed her post. She picked up a small, clean rag and carefully wiped the rim of a stack of paper cups. She had a job to do, and she wouldn't let a little disappointment stop her. Later, a teenager on a skateboard whizzed past, his music blasting from tiny earbuds. He skidded to a halt a few feet away, looked at the stand, and then at Maya. He dug into his pocket and pulled out some coins. "Hey," he said, his voice casual. "I'll take one." Maya's face lit up. It was like the sun had suddenly come out from behind a cloud. She carefully poured the lemonade, her small hands steady, making sure not to spill a single drop. She handed it to the teenager. He took a big gulp. "Not bad," he said, dropping 2 quarters into the jar. They landed with a sad little clink. "Thanks, kid." And then he was gone, kicking off down the sidewalk and disappearing around the corner. Maya looked into the jar. The 2 new quarters sat there, shining among the dull pennies and nickels. She picked them up and held them in her palm. They felt heavy, important. She thought about what her mother had told her, that every single penny helped. Every penny was a step. A step towards what? She wasn't entirely sure. She just knew it was a promise. A promise she had made to her brother Leo in the quiet, sterile-smelling room where he spent most of his days now. She had promised him she would do something big. She would help. This lemonade stand was the only big thing she knew how to do. The afternoon wore on. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the lawns. The street grew quieter. The sound of lawnmowers was replaced by the chirping of crickets. Maya had only had 3 customers all day. The teenager and a mail carrier who had bought 2 cups, one for now and one for the road. The jar was still painfully light. She looked at the crayon sign, the word seeming to mock her now. Lemonade -50. It felt so small, so useless. How could 50 cents at a time fix anything? How could it fight the big, scary monster that was making her brother so tired and pale? A single tear escaped and rolled down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away with the back of her hand. She wasn't allowed to be sad. Sadness was for grown-ups. Her job was to be strong, to be hopeful. She thought of Leo's smile, the way his eyes would sparkle when she told him silly jokes. She had to keep going. For him. She took the rag and wiped down the table one last time, making it perfectly clean. She arranged the cups in a neat stack. She stood up straight, pulled her shoulders back, and faced the empty street. She was just one little girl, and her stand was just a wobbly table on a corner. But in her heart, she was a warrior, fighting a battle with nothing but lemons, sugar, and a hope that was as fierce and as bright as the setting sun. She watched and waited, a tiny, determined silhouette against the fading light, ready for whatever came next. The sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the sky in strokes of orange and soft pink. The light grew golden, casting long, dancing shadows from the trees onto the pavement. Maya felt the day's warmth starting to fade, and a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature seeped into her bones. She had been out here for hours, and the small glass jar on her table was still woefully empty. The few coins from earlier in the day seemed to mock her, their metallic glint a reminder of how far she had to go. She let out a small, quiet sigh, a puff of air that was immediately lost in the gentle breeze. She thought about packing up, about going inside to the warmth of her home, but the image of her brother's tired face held her in place. She couldn't give up. Not yet. It was then that she saw him. A figure was walking down the opposite side of the street, his steps slow and unhurried. He was tall, with a lanky sort of build, and he moved with a quiet grace. As he got closer, he crossed the street, his path leading him directly toward her little corner of the world. Maya instinctively sat up straighter, her hand smoothing down the front of her t-shirt. She watched him approach, taking in the details. He wore a simple black baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, a scraggly beard that looked more like he'd forgotten to shave than a fashion statement, and a worn-out denim jacket that had frayed at the cuffs. His boots were scuffed and dusty. He looked like 1,000 other men she had seen in her neighborhood, tired from a long day, just looking for a quiet walk home. There was nothing about him that shouted, important or special. He was just a man. He stopped in front of her table, his shadow falling over her little stand. For a moment, he just stood there, reading her wobbly crayon sign. Maya held her breath, her heart thumping a little faster against her ribs. Then he looked up, and from under the brim of his cap, she saw his eyes. They were kind. It was the first thing she noticed. They were a deep, gentle brown, and they crinkled at the corners as a soft smile spread across his face. It wasn't a big, flashy smile. It was small and a little bit sad, but it was genuine, and it reached his eyes, making them warm. "I'll take one, please," he said. His voice was quiet, a low rumble that was surprisingly soft. It was a voice that felt calm and safe. Maya snapped into action. Her small hands moved with practiced efficiency, grabbing a clean paper cup from the stack. She carefully poured the pale yellow liquid, her tongue poking out from the corner of her mouth in concentration, just as her father had taught her. She made sure to get a good slice of lemon in there, just the way her brother liked it. She handed the cup to him, her fingers brushing against his for a brief second. His hand was large and calloused, but his touch was gentle. He took a sip, his eyes closing for a moment as he tasted it. He hummed, a sound of genuine appreciation. "That's really good. You made this yourself?" Maya nodded, a shy smile touching her lips for the first time that afternoon. As he took another sip, he leaned against the fence that ran along the sidewalk, his posture relaxed. He looked down at her, his kind eyes full of curiosity. "So," he began, his voice casual, "what's the grand plan? Saving up for something big?" The question hit Maya like a splash of cold water. The smile vanished from her face. The grand plan. The words echoed in her head, bringing with them a wave of images. The stark white walls of a hospital room. The the scary-looking machines with their blinking lights and beeping sounds, the way her brother's skin had turned pale and thin, the worried whispers of her parents late at night when they thought she was asleep. The weight of it all was immense, a giant, heavy monster that sat on her chest. How could she possibly explain that to this stranger? How could she put into words the fear that lived in her house, the fear that had stolen the laughter from her home? She looked down at her shoes, suddenly finding a loose thread on her sneaker incredibly interesting. The words were stuck in her throat, thick and heavy like peanut butter. She couldn't say it. Saying it out loud would make it too real, too big. It would be admitting that the monster was winning. "Helping my family," she finally mumbled, the words barely a whisper. She quickly looked up, forcing a bright, fake smile. "We need to buy some new things." For the house? It was a terrible lie, and she knew it. She felt her cheeks flush with heat. The man didn't say anything for a moment. He just looked at her, his expression unreadable. Maya braced herself, thinking he would ask more questions, that he would see right through her flimsy story. But he didn't. Instead, he just gave a slow, understanding nod. He saw the flicker of pain in her eyes, the shadow that passed over her small face, and he knew. He didn't know the details, but he knew this was not about toys or video games. He knew this was about something much, much bigger. He reached into the pocket of his worn jacket and pulled out his wallet. He opened it and took out a bill. It wasn't a $1 bill. It wasn't even a 5. He unfolded a crisp, new $20 bill and held it out. Maya's eyes went wide. She had never seen so much money in her life. It felt like a treasure from a pirate story. "For the lemonade," he said, his voice still soft. He folded the bill and gently tucked it into the glass jar. It made no sound at all, but it felt louder than any clinking coin ever could. "And keep the change," he added, giving her a small, conspiratorial wink. Before Maya could even find her voice to stammer a thank you, he did something unexpected. He didn't walk away. He sat down on the curb, right there on the sidewalk, his long legs bent in front of him. He took another long sip of his lemonade and looked out at the quiet street. "It's a beautiful evening," he said, as if they were old friends just passing the time. Maya just stood there, stunned. This strange, kind man was sitting on her street, drinking her lemonade and talking about the weather. It was the most normal, wonderful thing that had happened in a very long time. She found herself relaxing, the heavy weight on her chest feeling just a little bit lighter. She sat down on the little stool behind her table, mirroring his posture. "Yeah," she said, her voice a little stronger now. "It is." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. The only sounds the distant chirping of birds and the quiet slurping of him finishing his drink. He didn't ask any more questions. He didn't pry. He just sat with her, a quiet, steady presence in the fading light. When he was done, he crumpled the paper cup in his hand and stood up. "Thank you for the lemonade," he said, giving her another one of his warm, genuine smiles. "It was the best I've ever had." And then he was gone, walking down the sidewalk and disappearing around the corner. Just as quietly as he had arrived, Maya sat there for a long time, staring at the empty space where he had been. She looked at the $20 bill in the jar, a vibrant green promise amidst the dull coins. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling of hope that she hadn't felt in a very, very long time. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the way he looked at her, the way he sat with her, the way he seemed to understand without needing to be told. He was just a man, but he felt like an angel dot. Suddenly, the front door of the house across the street flew open. Her neighbor, a lady who was always full of energy and knew everything about everyone, came running out, her eyes wide with disbelief and excitement. She hurried across the street, not even bothering to look for cars. "Maya!" "Oh my goodness, Maya!" she exclaimed, her voice a breathless whisper as she reached the stand. She grabbed Maya's shoulders, her hands trembling slightly. "Do you have any idea who that was? Do you know who just bought lemonade from you?" Maya just shook her head, confused by the woman's dramatic reaction. The neighbor leaned in closer, her voice full of awe. That was Keanu Reeves, the movie star." The name meant nothing to Maya, it was just a name. But the kind eyes, the gentle voice, the $20 bill, and the quiet moment on the curb, those meant everything. She looked at the woman, then back at the jar, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. The world might see a movie star, but she knew better. She knew she had just met a very good man. The name Keanu Reeves hung in the cool evening air like a firework that had just exploded. Maya didn't understand it. To her, it was just a sound, a collection of strange syllables. But her neighbor, the lady from across the street, said it with a kind of gasp, as if she had just seen a real-life superhero. Maya just shrugged, her attention still fixed on the glass jar in her hands. Inside, the $20 bill sat like a green mountain surrounded by a few scattered coins at its base. It was the most money she had ever held. The front door of her own house creaked open, and her parents stepped out. Their faces were etched with the same tired worry they always wore, but there was a flicker of something else as they saw the scene unfolding. They had heard the neighbors' excited shouts. Her father walked over, his long shadow covering Maya and her little table. He knelt down, his eyes gentle as they landed on the bill in the jar. "Well now," he said, his voice a low rumble. "What have we here?" He didn't sound angry or surprised, just deeply, deeply tired. "The man gave me this," Maya said, her voice filled with a quiet pride. "He said my lemonade was the best he ever had." Her mother came up behind them, wrapping her arms around herself as if she were cold, even though the evening was mild. She looked at the money, then at her daughter's hopeful face, and a complex emotion washed over her. It was a mix of love, pride, and a profound, aching sadness. That's wonderful, sweetie," she whispered. But the words caught in her throat. The neighbor, still buzzing with excitement, started telling them the whole story. He was just walking down the street. Can you believe it? Right here on our block. And he bought lemonade from Maya. She was talking about movies and famous people, but the family wasn't really listening. Their world had shrunk so much that things like movie stars felt like they were happening on another planet. "Okay, time to pack up," Maya's father said, his voice gentle but firm. He started folding the wobbly table, its brightly colored legs collapsing with a soft clatter. Her mother gathered the paper cups and the pitcher, the remaining lemonade sloshing sadly inside. Maya clutched the jar to her chest, her treasure. It felt heavy, not just with the weight of the money, but with the weight of the hope it represented. Inside the house, the air was different. It was quiet and still, a stark contrast to the neighbors' cheerful chatter. The house felt less like a home and more like a waiting room. On the kitchen counter, next to a half-empty box of cereal, sat a small plastic organizer filled with pill bottles, each with a label with tiny, hard-to-read words. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a cartoon dog, was a children's drawing of a smiling sun, but underneath it, a calendar was covered in red circles. Each one marking a doctor's appointment or a treatment day. They all sat down at the wooden kitchen table. The wood was worn smooth from years of family dinners, homework sessions, and late-night talks. But tonight, the silence was heavy. Maya placed the jar in the center of the table, the $20 bill facing them like a trophy. "Let's count it," Maya said, her voice full of purpose. This was her ritual. Her mother forced a smile and nodded. "Okay, sweetie. Let's count." Maya carefully unscrewed the lid and tipped the contents onto the table. The coins spilled out with a clatter that sounded both happy and pathetic. She separated the quarters from the dimes and the nickels, her small fingers moving with a practiced seriousness. Her father watched her, his hands clasped on the table, his knuckles white. He saw the determination in his daughter's face, and it felt like a knife twisting in his heart. One by one, Maya stacked the coins. 4 quarters. That's $1. And another that's 2. She counted out the dimes, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her mother reached out and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her daughter's face. Her touch was feather-light, full of a love so immense it was painful. Finally, all the coins were counted. $7.50, Maya announced, her voice proud. She then carefully picked up the $20 bill, smoothing it out on the table. "And this, so that's $27.50. She looked up at her parents, her eyes shining with expectation. Is that a lot? Is it enough? The question hung in the air, simple and innocent, but it shattered something inside her parents. Her father looked away, staring out the dark window, his jaw clenched so tightly it ached. Her mother bowed her head, and a single tear escaped, tracing a silent path down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, but it was too late. Maya had seen it. The smile faded from Maya's face. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice small. "Isn't it enough for Leo's medicine?" The mention of her brother's name was like a key turning a lock in their hearts, releasing a flood of grief they had been trying so hard to hold back. Her father reached across the table and took Maya's small hand in his large, calloused one. His grip was firm, a desperate attempt to hold on, to keep his family from falling apart. "Oh, sweetie," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "It's wonderful. It's more than wonderful. It's a miracle." He looked at the $20 bill, a gift from a kind stranger, a moment of light in their endless darkness. "But it's not enough." The mother finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "It's never enough, my love." Maya looked from her father's pained face to her mother's tear-streaked one. She didn't understand about insurance premiums or deductibles. She didn't understand about experimental treatments that cost more than their house. She only understood the simple, brutal facts of her world. Her brother Leo, who used to run through the sprinkler with her, his laughter echoing through the yard, was now in a bed in a room that smelled like clean sheets and sickness. He was tired all the time. His hair was gone. He hurt Dot, and the medicine, the special medicine that the doctors said was their only hope, cost a lot of money. More money than her parents had. More money than they could ever imagine having. The father looked at his daughter, at the warrior who sat at their kitchen table, and decided he couldn't hide the truth from her anymore. She was living it every single day. "Remember when we told you Leo had a very bad sickness inside him?" he asked Dot. Maya nodded, her eyes wide. "Well, the doctors have a special kind of magic medicine that can fight it. It's like a superhero that can go inside his body and make the bad sickness go away." Maya leaned forward, her whole body focused on his words. "A superhero?" "Yes," her mother chimed in, her voice a little stronger now. "A very strong, very special superhero, but this superhero is very expensive. It costs more money than we have in the bank. More money than we can make." Maya looked down at the coins and the bill on the table. Her small fortune. It was her contribution, her way of helping to buy the superhero. But now she understood. Her $27 was just a single drop of water in a vast, empty ocean. "So that's why," she started, her voice trailing off as the full weight of it settled on her small shoulders. "That's why I have the stand." "Yes, sweetie," her father said, his voice cracking. "That's why you have the stand." The kitchen was silent again, but this time it was different. It wasn't a heavy, empty silence. It was filled with a shared understanding, a shared sorrow, and a shared, fierce love. Maya looked at the money on the table. It wasn't just money anymore. It was a prayer. Every single coin was a wish. The $20 bill was a miracle, a sign that there were good people in the world. People who would stop and help a little girl. But it was also a reminder of how far they still had to go. Slowly, Maya began to gather the coins, her movements deliberate and careful. She stacked them neatly and placed them back in the jar. She straightened the $20 bill, making sure it was perfectly flat, and placed it on top. She screwed the lid on tight. She didn't say anything else. She just picked up the jar and walked over to a special place on the kitchen counter, next to the pill bottles. She stood it there like a soldier standing guard. Tomorrow, she would take it back out to the corner. Tomorrow, she would fight again. Because for her brother, for the chance to buy that superhero, she would do anything. Every coin, every customer, every glass of lemonade was a battle in a war she was determined to win. The neighbor from across the street, her heart still thrumming with the excitement of her celebrity sighting, practically floated back to her house. She couldn't keep this to herself. It was too good, too wonderful. She sat down at her computer, the glow of the screen illuminating her eager face. She logged on to the local community Facebook page, a place where people usually posted about lost cats or upcoming garage sales. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. "You won't believe who I just saw on Maple Street," she typed, adding a few exclamation points for good measure. She described the kind man, the simple interaction, and the big tip. She didn't know the whole story, of course. To her, it was just a perfect feel-good moment. She ended the post with, "Keanu Reeves buys lemonade from our little neighborhood entrepreneur." How cool is that? She attached a slightly blurry photo of Maya's now empty stand, the crayon sign still leaning against the chair. Then she hit share, and watched as the likes and comments started to roll in. The post spread like dandelion seeds in a strong wind. It was shared and reshared, moving from the local page to citywide groups and then beyond. It was the kind of simple, happy news that people craved. A young reporter at a local television station saw it. Her name was Anya, and she was always looking for stories that connected with people on a real level. This was perfect. It was charming, it was local, and it had a touch of Hollywood magic. "Get me the family," she told her producer. "I want to do a piece on this for the evening news." The next day, a car with a news channel logo pulled up outside the house. Maya's parents watched from the window, their stomachs clenching. They were private people, and their world had become so small and fragile. The idea of letting a camera into it felt invasive and scary. But the reporter, Anya, was gentle and persistent. She stood on their doorstep, not with a camera crew, but by herself. She explained that she just wanted to share a nice story about their daughter and her little business. "People need to hear good things right now," she said, her voice sincere. Reluctantly, they agreed. They moved the wobbly table back into the living room, and Maya, now shy in front of the stranger, stood beside it. Anya asked her simple questions. "What's the best part of running a lemonade stand? How did it feel when that nice man gave you such a big tip?" Maya answered quietly, her eyes often darting to her parents for reassurance, but as Anya talked with them, she started to see the cracks beneath the surface. She noticed the way the father's shoulders were permanently hunched, as if carrying a heavy weight. She saw the deep, unshakable tiredness in the mother's eyes. She couldn't help but glance at the refrigerator, where the cheerful sun drawing was overshadowed by the intimidating grid of red circles on the calendar. Her journalistic instincts kicked in. This story was deeper than she thought. After they finished filming with Maya, Anya turned to the parents. "Your daughter is incredible," she said softly. "She's so focused for someone her age. What made her want to do this?" The parents looked at each other. It was a moment of decision. They could give a simple answer, or they could tell the truth. The truth was terrifying. It meant laying their family's pain bare for the world to see. But they were so tired, so desperate. And looking at their daughter, who had given everything she had to this little stand, they knew she deserved for her fight to be understood. The mother took a deep breath, and the story came pouring out. She told Anya about Leo, about the diagnosis that had turned their world upside down, about the experimental treatment that was their only hope. She spoke of the mountain of bills that buried them a little more each day, a mountain that Maya was trying to conquer, one 50-cent cup at a time. As she spoke, her voice broke, and her husband reached over and held her hand, his own eyes glistening. That evening, the news segment aired. It started with the cute story the neighbor had posted. But then it shifted. Anya's voiceover was gentle but clear. What started as a simple act of kindness from a movie star has revealed a story of incredible strength and love. The piece showed Maya at her stand, her determined face, and then it cut to the emotional interview with her parents, their faces thoughtfully blurred to protect their privacy. The report was not about a celebrity. It was about a family's silent battle, a sister's fierce love, and the crushing weight of trying to save a child's life. The response was immediate, and more powerful than anything they could have imagined. The news station, moved by the story, put a link to a verified crowdfunding page at the bottom of the screen. Maya's father, his hands shaking, clicked on the link on their old laptop. He watched as the donation page loaded. The first number was $100. He refreshed it. It was $500. He refreshed it again. And it had jumped to $2,000. The numbers climbed so fast they were a blur. 10,000, 25,000, 50,000. Along with the money came a flood of messages from strangers all over the world. I'm a single mom and I can only give $10, but I hope it helps. My son went through the same thing. There is hope. Here's for the superhero, little warrior. You got this. They sat there, the three of them, huddled around the glowing screen, watching a digital river of generosity flow towards them. It was overwhelming. It was a tidal wave of human kindness. The father, a man who hadn't cried in years, wept silently, tears of relief and gratitude streaming down his face. The mother just held Maya tight, rocking her back and forth, whispering, "Thank you," over and over again to a world they had never met. The story even found its way back to the man who had started it all. A friend of Keanu Reeves sent him the link to the news report. He watched it in the quiet of his own home, seeing the full story for the first time. He saw the little girl at her stand, remembered her serious eyes, and understood the weight she carried. Without any fanfare or public announcement, he made a substantial donation to the fund. It wasn't about getting credit. It was about helping. It was a quiet, private act, just like his purchase of lemonade on that sunny afternoon. For the first time in a very long time, the suffocating cloud of financial fear began to lift. It wasn't just the money, though that was a miracle. It was the feeling of being seen, of not being alone in their fight. The ripple of kindness from that one small encounter had become a wave, and it was carrying them, lifting them up towards a shore they had thought was impossible to reach. Months passed, and the seasons began to change. The hot summer sun gave way to the cool, crisp air of autumn. The media frenzy died down, the news crews moved on to other stories, and the world's attention shifted. But for Maya's family, everything was different. The wobbly lemonade stand was now stored in the garage, a relic of a battle that had changed their lives. The heavy silence that used to fill their house was gone, replaced by something lighter, something that felt a lot like hope. The financial weight had been lifted completely. The father had quit his second job, and the dark circles under his eyes were slowly fading. The mother laughed more often, her smile no longer a forced effort but a genuine reflection of the peace in her heart. They could finally focus all their energy on what truly mattered, their children. And most importantly, Leo was getting the superhero medicine. The treatment was hard. There were good days and bad days. But for the first time since the diagnosis, there was a clear and measurable sign of progress. The doctors were optimistic. On a crisp Saturday afternoon, Maya was sitting on the floor of Leo's room, which was now filled with get-well cards and drawings from people they would never meet. Leo was propped up in bed, a colorful beanie on his head to keep him warm. He was still pale and thin, but his eyes, once dull with sickness, now had a spark of their old light back. They were in the middle of a fierce card game, and Leo had just played a winning card, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. "I win again," he crowed, his voice still a little weak but full of spirit. Maya pretended to be mad, crossing her arms and puffing out her cheeks. "You cheated." "Did not," he shot back, giggling. The sound was the most beautiful music in the world to their parents, who were watching quietly from the doorway. The stand had become a symbol in their small town. It was a story parents told their children about the power of one small person to make a big difference. Other kids had started their own little stands, not for sick brothers, but for animal shelters or to buy books for the school library. They all called it doing a Maya. The original stand, with its wobbly, colorful legs, was even asked to be displayed in the local library's community showcase. A testament to the power of hope. One evening, the family sat down for dinner. It was a simple meal of spaghetti and meatballs, but it felt like a feast. They were all together under one roof without the constant, gnawing worry of bills and what-ifs. The father looked around the table at his family. He saw his wife, her face relaxed and beautiful in the soft light of the dining room. He saw his son, who was home from the hospital for the weekend, telling a silly story about his nurse. And then he looked at his daughter, Maya. She was just a kid again, twirling spaghetti on her fork and laughing at her brother's joke. She wasn't a warrior on a corner anymore. She was just a sister, a daughter, a little girl who had saved them all. He understood then what the story was really about. It wasn't about a movie star. It wasn't even about the money as Life Chan. The seasons turned, painting the world in new colors. The relentless heat of summer softened into the crisp, golden embrace of autumn. The leaves on the trees, once a vibrant green, blazed into shades of orange and red before drifting down to carpet the lawns. For Maya's family, the change in the weather was a mirror for the change inside their home. The heavy, suffocating cloud of fear that had hung over them for so long had finally begun to lift, dissipated by an unexpected wave of kindness from people they would never meet. The wobbly lemonade stand, once a symbol of their desperate fight, now sat folded in the corner of the garage, a relic of a battle that had been won. The daily ritual of counting coins was replaced by a new, more comforting sound, the sound of laughter. It was a sound that had been missing from their house for a long time, and now it echoed through the halls, a sweet, beautiful music. The most wonderful change was in Leo. He was still sick, and the road ahead was long, but he was home more often than he was in the hospital. The superhero medicine, the one Maya's lemonade had helped buy, was working. It was a slow, hard fight, but for the first time they were winning. His hair was starting to grow back, a soft fuzz on his head that he loved to have his mother rub. The color was returning to his cheeks, and the spark in his eyes, which had been so dim, was now shining brightly again. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Maya and Leo were sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by a fortress of colorful pillows. They were in the middle of an epic battle with a dragon, played by a rather fierce-looking stuffed dinosaur. Leo, wielding a cardboard sword, was the brave knight, and Maya, with a pot on her head for a helmet, was his loyal squire. "Take that, you scary beast," Leo yelled, whacking the dinosaur with a surprising amount of energy. His voice, once a weak whisper, was now strong and clear. Maya cheered him on, banging two pot lids together like cymbals. "Get him, Sir Leo. Don't let him breathe fire on the castle." Their father stood in the doorway, watching them. A smile was spread across his face, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. He felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the autumn sun streaming through the window. For months, he had only been able to watch his son through the sterile glass of a hospital window or see him exhausted and pale in a sickbed. Now he was watching his son play. He was being a kid again. It was a sight more precious than any treasure in the world. Their mother came in with 2 glasses of juice and a plate of cookies. "All right, you two mighty warriors, time for a snack break." Leo flopped down on the pillows, his breath coming in happy little puffs. He grabbed a cookie and took a big bite. "Maya," he said, his mouth full, "remember when you used to sell lemonade?" Maya nodded, taking off her pot helmet. "Yeah, why did you stop?" he asked. "You were really good at it." Their parents exchanged a look. It was a question they had been waiting for, Maya thought for a moment. "Because," she said simply, "we bought the superhero. And he's here now." She pointed her sword at Leo. "He's protecting you." Leo looked down at his hands, then back at his sister. He didn't understand about crowdfunding or news reports or the generosity of strangers. But he understood his sister. He had always known she was fighting for him. He reached over and gave her a hug, a tight, fierce hug that said everything words couldn't. "Thanks, Maya," he whispered. The story of the little lemonade stand had become a local legend. It wasn't just a news story that people had forgotten about a week later. It had stuck. The wobbly table was now on display in the front window of the town library, with a small, simple plaque next to it that read, "Maya's Stand, a reminder that even the smallest hands can make the biggest difference." Children would press their faces against the glass to look at it, their parents telling them the story. Their kids in the neighborhood were inspired. They started their own little stands, but not for themselves. One little boy sold homemade bracelets to raise money for the local animal shelter. A group of sisters sold painted rocks to buy new books for the children's wing of the hospital. They all called it doing a Maya. It had become a verb, a shorthand for an act of selfless childhood kindness. Maya's fight had sparked a movement of compassion in her small corner of the world. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of purple and pink, the family sat down for dinner. It was a simple meal of chicken and roasted vegetables, but the atmosphere was rich with love and gratitude. The father looked around the table at his family. He saw his wife, her face relaxed and beautiful in the soft candlelight. The lines of worry that had been etched there for so long finally smoothed away. He saw his son telling a silly joke about a penguin and a robot, his laughter filling the room. And he saw his daughter, Maya, listening to her brother, her eyes shining with love. He thought back to that summer, to the sight of his little girl standing alone on the corner, her small shoulders carrying the weight of the world. He remembered the ache in his heart, the feeling of utter helplessness. And then he thought about the kindness of a stranger, a man who just happened to be famous, but whose true fame was in his gentle heart. He thought about the thousands of people who had donated, who had sent messages of hope, who had lifted his family out of a darkness so deep they thought they would never see the light again. He realized the story was never really about a movie, Star-Buying Lemonade. It was about something much more powerful. It was about the fierce, unwavering love of a little girl for her brother. It was about a community, both local and global, coming together to support a family in need. It was a reminder that even in a world that can often feel cold and divided, there is an incredible amount of goodness in people. The lemonade was just the catalyst. The real magic was the human connection it had created. Later that night, after the dishes were done and the house was quiet, Maya stood on the front porch looking up at the sky. The air was cool and smelled of fallen leaves and wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney. 1,000,000 stars were twinkling overhead like a giant handful of spilled diamonds. She thought about the kind man with the gentle eyes, the one who had started it all with his $20 bill and his quiet presence. She still didn't know his movies, and it didn't matter. She knew his heart. She thought about all the strangers who had helped them, a vast, invisible army of angels. She thought about her brother's laugh, which was now her favorite sound in the whole world. The battle wasn't over, not completely. There would still be hard days, more doctor's appointments, and more treatments. But they had hope, they had each other, and they had an army of love behind them. As she stood there, a small silhouette against the vast, starry sky, she knew that she had done more than just sell lemonade. She had helped her family find their way back to the light. And that was a sweetness that would last forever, long after the last drop of summer lemonade was gone.